That second type of iman is what we call the iman of the three. This is actually what you believe in your heart. And this only God knows. So somebody could be, legally speaking, a Christian, legally speaking, a Jew, legally speaking, a Muslim. For all we know, the Christian's going to go to heaven, the Jew's going to go to heaven, and the Muslim's going to go to hell. Because only God knows what someone's faith actually is. But that doesn't mean that we erase the categories that actually give our communities body. I mean, imagine you have a Muslim community here. Muslim community means there's something about Muslims that's different than Christians, that's different from Jews. And if you're just trying to erase all these boundaries because you say we don't know what true faith is, you've destroyed the very fabric of society. So in the Islamic tradition, there's a big difference between saying someone's a Catholic, which is a legal ruling. It means you're not Muslim. You've rejected Islam as a category. I have no idea what's going to happen to you in the afterlife. I don't know what's going to happen to me in the afterlife. But the fact that you're a Catholic and that I'm a Muslim means that there's certain things we can't do. I can't marry you. You can't inherit from me. That doesn't mean that I can't buy something from you, that I can't sell something to you, that I don't care for you. And we have in the life of the Prophet tremendous examples of this. The Prophet is very interesting. Throughout his entire life in Medina, first of all, in Medina, he was responsible for adjudicating disputes between any two people, between Jews and Muslims, between polytheists and Muslims, between polytheists and Jews. But what does the Quran say? If they come to have you rule between them, فَحْكُمْ بَيْنَهُمْ بِالْعَدْلِ. Right? Rule between them by truth, by justice. The Prophet would, and sometimes he would actually, there's an interesting case when there's a Muslim named Ibn al-Ashar, and he said that there's a Jew who claimed that, a Jewish Arab who claimed that he owned some of this Muslim's land. And they went before the Prophet, and the Prophet asked the Muslim, do you have any evidence? He says, no, I own this land. And he asked the Jewish person to swear an oath that you own this land. The Jewish person swears, and the Prophet says, okay, the land is yours. You're prepared to swear an oath. He has no evidence. Islamically speaking, I'm ruling in your favor. The Muslim is very upset. What? You're ruling on behalf of a Jew? This is how justice works. And there's so many instances in the life of the Prophet. I mean, at one point he actually buys food from a Jewish neighbor, and he says he's going to pay them back in a few months. And he leaves his armor with the Jewish family as guaranteed as a security deposit. And he's the prophet. First of all, he's a leader of the community. He could just, I assume, take it. Second of all, he's a prophet of God who could probably make some kind of argument that I need to take this. But he's engaged in very mundane transactions with Jews and polytheists in his community. When they went to fight the Battle of Hunayn after the Muslims took Mecca, he actually borrowed numerous suits of armor from an Arab who is still a pagan, who hadn't become Muslim yet. And the man said, are you taking these? You're just taking them from me? He said, no. We're taking them, and we guarantee we'll bring them back, and if they're damaged, we'll repay you for them. What are the other types of relationships that Muslims can have? What are the sort of notions of rights and obligations that Muslims have in society? When the sheikh on the Egyptian television was saying, just because I think you're a kafir doesn't mean that I'm not going to be polite to you and that I'm not going to visit you while you're sick. Where does this come from? This is a big part of the Prophet's life. In one hadith, the Prophet says, Jiran thalatha. There's three types of neighbors. And I'll just give you the English. There's a neighbor who is a mushrik, is a polytheist. But they have the haqq al-jawar. They have the right of a neighbor. You have to, what is the right of a neighbor, the Prophet says? If they're sick, you visit them. If they die, you go and you go to their funeral and you give your condolences. If they're in need of some clothing, you provide it. If something good happens to them, you congratulate them. If something bad happens to them, you comfort them. If you can't cook food that smells really good and the smell of the food is going into their house. You can't do that unless you offer them some of the food. These are all the type of things that a neighbor has to offer his neighbor. What does neighbor mean? Well, Ali bin Abi Talib says that anybody who hears the same adhan, is in the range of hearing the same adhan from that mosque, that person is your neighbor. Other people say anybody 40 houses away, up to 40 houses away in every direction, that's a neighbor. And as we saw from the life of the Prophet, even if you're not someone's neighbor, you still have agreements of contract, you have to respect their property, you have to respect their bodily integrity, you can't hurt them, right? You can't punch them, you can't go and take something from them. These are all rules that everybody in a society has to follow as Muslims. So, what the Egyptian sheikh who called in to defend himself on his television show was saying is that what you think about another person's ultimate fate in the afterlife, what you think about whether or not their belief is correct or not, what you think about whether every single thing they do during the day is right or wrong, this has absolutely nothing to do with the daily interactions we all have in society. Personal interactions, commercial interactions. These are all governed by, for Muslims, very specific rules. Rules that apply to Muslims and non-Muslims. All those neighbors I talked about, it doesn't matter if they're Muslims or non-Muslims or Christians or polytheists or Buddhists or whatever, they still have those rights. And if you think about it in the United States, I'd say that's how things work here. Despite the fact that people tend to talk about loving one another and things like that, when's the last time you went to the store and you didn't steal something from the store because you love the cashier? Or you didn't, run a red light because you love all the other drivers in the intersection. I mean, this is nonsense. Actually, at least from my perspective, love has nothing to do with my interaction with people every day. It has to do with the fact that in our society there's generally agreed upon code of obligations and rights, proper manners, and this is how people coexist. This is how Muslims, I think Islam teaches people should coexist, and this is how I think functionally in the United States, healthy liberalism works. I think one of the enemies, one of the opponents of this is an intolerant tolerance, an intolerant liberalism that requires us to erase our beliefs in affirming those of others. It requires us to deny our own moralities because we have to affirm those of others. I know that iftar is coming, so eyes are going to glaze over. And I don't know if you want to have any questions or answers or anything, or later on. Okay. So otherwise, I think now you'll have something more entertaining, which is fundraising and another raffle. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Brown. It was a very interesting lecture on tolerance. What we're going to do is have another raffle. If I could have Marie come up.